Hi there everyone, welcome to the basic demonstration of CostX. Throughout this video we will be running through a few topics to give you a general overview on what CostX is about and what CostX is capable of doing. To start off with, right off the bat, CostX is a Windows-based program. With regards to the interface and user face, you should actually pick up that it's relatively easy to understand, as it's structured very much like some other software out there, where we have ribbons running alongside each other at the top, and then within each of these ribbons we have different sections of tools to help us throughout our workflow. CostX has got two additional tabs over here, one called the Dimension View and the other called the Costing View. The Dimension View side of the software is where we go ahead and import drawings and do all our measurements. And then the Costing View side is where we attach costs to our measurements in a workbook format. To start off with, I'm going to go ahead and click on the Dimension View. As soon as I select the Dimension View tab, a display window will appear, our drawing list window will also appear, and then our dimension group window will also appear on the bottom left hand side. I've already got some data set up, ready to go, but how do I add this drawing? The first thing we need to know, when we add a drawing, we just click on the Drawings ribbon at the top, and then click on the Add button. You can see I've got a few different drawings ready to import. However, before I go ahead and select a drawing and import, you can see all the different file formats that we support. So right through from the most basic file types, like your image files, your PNGs, your JPEGs and GIFs and bitmaps. Say for instance you have a Google image or saved as a JPEG, you can actually go ahead and do a site clearance measure from that image. That's just an example, but yeah, we can support all the different image file formats. Then moving on, your PDF format, which is probably the most common file type out there, both a raster, which is a scanned PDF, as well as a vector PDF, which is slightly more intelligent. And then your DWG CAD files, obviously, which is a lot more intelligent, which includes some layers, CAD blocks and so on, which I'll touch on a little later. And then the DWF BIM models, we can support IFC file formats, which is your industry foundation classes. There are also a few other file types that we can support, like our SketchUp file types. So pretty much all the file formats that are out there, CostX is able to support. To start off with, I will select a existing PDF. This is actually a scanned PDF, so the most basic file type. Just select the file type and then click on Open. You'll see that this CostX actually picks up that there's 3 pages as part of the scanned document. I'm just happy to bring in the first one, so I'll click on OK. The drawing appears in the background, and then the drawing properties window appears. This window is the window where we can go ahead and rename the drawing. We can put into a folder if you want to. You can just type in a new folder name if you want to. However, if you have created a folder name in the historically, you can just select it from the drop-down menu. You can also set up a drawing register if needed. You'll notice at the bottom over here we have different scales that we can have preset scales or select some preset scales. Or if you know the exact scale, you can go ahead and enter it in yourself. However, with this drawing in the background over here, this drawing has actually been scanned and printed and scanned and printed over and over again. It's lost its proportion and it's out of ratio. So I actually don't trust the scale that is on this drawing. In that case, what I will do is I'll leave the scale as 1:1 and then click on Insert. And you'll see that there's the new drawing that appears within our architectural folder. Now when I move the mouse cursor over onto the drawing, I can zoom into the drawing and have a look at the scale. There it says 1:100, like I mentioned before. I actually don't trust that scale. So the first thing that I would do in this type of scenario, I'd go ahead and click on the Calibrate X-axis. You'll see when I click on that button, my mouse cursor changes to a crosshair, and I can zoom into a known dimension on the X-axis of the drawing. So I'll use this 7 meters dimension over here. Simply left click at the beginning of the dimension, drag the mouse cursor out and left click again at the end of the dimension. You'll see that the Calibrate X measurement window appears. This is where we can go ahead and put in the actual measurement of this line. In this case, it's 7,000 millimeters. Now you'll notice CostX will want to automatically apply the same factor to the y-axis. However, in this case, again, I don't trust that, so I'd rather do it independently. So I'll then tick that checkbox, click on OK, and it says, now calibrate the y-axis. Yes, I'm happy to do that, so I'll click on OK. Zoom into a known dimension on the y-axis, and then again, just simply left click, drag it out, and left click at the end of the dimension, and this is actually 5.3 meters long. Click on OK, and you should hopefully notice that the drawing's actually reproportioned itself. It's in the correct ratio. It's a little bit more squashed, but it's in the correct ratio now, and it's ready for us to do a takeoff. For us to do a takeoff, we need to add dimension groups into CostX. You can see I've already created a few dimension groups. I'm just expanding the dimension group folders. There are a few dimension groups that I've already created, and you'll notice I've also already measured into some of these dimension groups. That's on the other drawing, which I'll get to a later stage. But again, how do I add these dimension groups into CostX? Just like when we went to drawings and clicked on add, this time we click on the dimensions ribbon and then click on add. So in this case, I'm just going to give it a name called dining as an example, and I'll put it into the same folder of general and the subfolder called rooms. So you can just select the down arrow, general, and subfolder called rooms. So in this dimension group properties window, this is where we can rename the dimension group, put into a folder, and we can set all the properties for the dimension group. And this is probably the one important one, is the measurement type. So if I click on the down arrow, we can go ahead and select what measurement type do we want to use for this dimension group. Because I'm measuring the area of the dining room, I'm happy to select area. The default display I'll leave as area for now. However, we can go ahead and adjust that if needed. We can also put in a default height for the dimension group. In this case, I'll just put in a default wall height of, say for instance, 2.7 meters high. We also have a default offset, which we can get to at a later stage, but basically that's the default offset from your finished floor level to the underside of your windows. If you were measuring windows, you put that height in there. Then over here we have different highlight pens that we can choose from and different hatching patterns that we can go ahead and adjust before inserting this dimension group. Once we've completed all the properties for the dimension group, I can go ahead and click on insert, and you'll notice there's the new dimension group called dining with a 0 quantity attached to it at this stage. So to do the measurement on the drawing, we need to make sure that we have the dimension group selected, and then I can move over and zoom into the dining room in this instance. Simply point to the corner of the room, register left click, and then I can just move out to the next corner, register another left click, and so on and so forth, and I can make my way around the perimeter of the dining room. It's important to note that this is the most basic file format, so I'm actually creating my own lines in this drawing, whereas if it is a vector PDF drawing or a DWG drawing, we could actually select the lines, which will pick up the intelligence of the drawing. But in this case, I'm happy just to click around the perimeter, hit the enter key, and you'll notice it closes off that area, and it's measured 17 square meters into that dimension group. Not only has it picked up 17 square meters, when I hover the mouse cursor over this area that I've measured, you can see there it's registered a count, so it's counted one dining room. It's got a length quantity, which is the perimeter around that area. It's got a height, which I set at 2.7. It's got a area quantity, which is your floor finish and ceiling finish quantity. And then we've also got a wall area quantity. Obviously at this stage, measured overall, we haven't gone ahead and deducted for the doors yet. Okay, we also do have a volume quantity over there. However, that's in this specific example would be the volume of the air in the room. We can change that up. So for instance, when we measure concrete, we can just change the height to our slab thickness and it'll work out the volume for our concrete pour. This measurement is completely adjustable. We can pick up and drag the point and readjust the position of that point if needed. If you're not happy with some of your accuracy, we can also pick up lines. So say for instance I want to include the kitchen area, I can left click on that line and drag it out to include the kitchen area. We can also add in points. So if I right click on this line segment, I can go ahead and choose add point, and you'll see there's a new point that's been added, and I can readjust it if needed. And you'll see when I've readjusted this measurement, the quantity has also automatically been updated to 23 square meters. And when I hover over the updated area, you can see that list of quantities in the gray hint box has also been updated. This again was just the most basic file format. I'm going to move on to a slightly more intelligent drawing now. So I'll just select this drawing over here. And you'll see that this is actually a DWG CAD file. One of the first things that you'll probably notice is when I move the mouse cursor over onto the drawing, the mouse cursor actually sticks to the lines. So that was that intelligence that I mentioned previously. There's a lot more intelligence behind a file type like this, and also therefore it's beneficial to measure from a file type like this. Very similar to a vector PDF file, a couple differences which I'll get to in a second. The first one is layers. So if I click on the layers tab, you'll see it'll bring up a list of all the different layers that have been included in this DWG drawing. If it was a vector PDF drawing, CostX generates layers based on its colors. We can use these checkboxes to turn some of the layers on and off. Say for instance we wanted to neaten this drawing up. Before I continue on with my measurements, I can just use these checkboxes out on the left hand side. Sometimes it can be difficult to pick up or read what that layer includes because of the name that's been added to that layer. So probably a better method or an easier method would be to move the mouse cursor over onto the drawing. And the method to now visually see what you're about to remove from this drawing, you'll see that the mouse cursor actually snaps to that line. And if I hold down the Shift key, it gives us a preview of that entire layer that I'm about to remove. So whilst holding down Shift, I can left click and it'll turn that layer off. And I can just simply point at the remaining layers I'd like to turn off, just to neaten up this drawing before I do my measurement. Great, so now that I've removed some of the layers from this drawing, I need to click back onto the Drawings tab to return back to my measurement mode. Now that I'm back into my measurement mode, you can see that I've actually already measured a few different areas. When I select these dimension groups, the corresponding measure is displayed in the display window on the right hand side. If I would like to see all my measurements within this Rooms folder, I can just select the Rooms folder and you'll notice it'll display everything that's been measured within this Rooms folder. In this instance, you can see I still need to measure the patio, the bedroom, and the corridor. So I'm going to go ahead and select my patio dimension group. At the moment it's got a quantity of 0. When I move the mouse cursor over onto the drawing, again it sticks to the line, so it's picking up the intelligence behind this drawing file type. Whereas in the previous drawing file type, it wasn't sticking to any lines. So in this case I can just simply left click on the line and make my way around the perimeter of the patio area. It's important to note as well that you only need to click in every change of direction. So you can see I've registered a left click over there. The next time I can click is at the top right hand side over here, and it actually picks up the change in direction for us. Same over here, pick up that change in direction. To enclose the area or finish your measurement, you can just simply hit the enter key on the keyboard and you can see it's closed off that area. So I've measured 60 square meters for the patio area. When I hover the mouse cursor over this measured area, you'll notice in that gray hint box that I've got a count of 1. So it's counted 1 patio area. I've got a length, which is a perimeter around there. This time when I set this dimension group up, I applied a height of 0.10 for my slab thickness. Then I've also got the area for the floor finish, and I've got a wall area quantity which could possibly be used for a formwork around the edges of that slab. And then I've also got the volume quantity for my concrete pour. So in a few simple clicks we can derive all of these quantities from a simple takeoff. For this little patio area over here, CostX offers a quick point method of measurement for regular shapes. So regular shapes being squares, rectangles, or triangles. We can pick up the area of regular shapes really quickly by holding down the Shift key. When I hold down the Shift key on the keyboard, you'll notice that there are 4 crosshairs that are sent up from the mouse cursor. Wherever these crosshairs meet a line, it will want to enclose that area. So for instance, if I move the mouse cursor down over here, it wouldn't work in this case because that horizontal crosshair is touching that door leaf. I would need to move that horizontal crosshair down to pick up that internal wall, and then it would work in that case. So for this little patio, I can hold down the Shift key, left click once, and I've measured that area in one click. It's added the quantity to the overall dimension group called patio, and when I hover over this individual measure, it gives us all of these quantities again. So I've got the volume for that concrete pour to that slab. I'm just going to zoom out and just pick up on what I still need to measure. So I'll just click on the rooms folder again. You can see I still need to measure the bedroom over there. What I can do is, I could actually leave all the other measurements displayed on the screen, and then I could click on the down arrow over here and select what current dimension group do I want to measure. In this case, I want to measure my bedrooms, so I'll select the bedroom dimension group. I'll zoom into my bedroom number 2, and again, to pick up the area, we just simply click around the perimeter. When we get to a curve, you just need to hold down the left mouse button and drag it around the curve, and it picks up the curve for us. And enter, and I've completed that area, and it's been added to the overall dimension group of bedrooms. Finally, I have the corridor to measure. So I'll select my corridor dimension group. Sometimes designers include polylines on their drawing. Now, I'm not sure whether you have ever heard of what a polyline is, but basically it's one continuous line that encloses a full area regardless of its shape. So sometimes you'll find that designers do use polylines in their drawings and sometimes not. In this case, I've got my corridor dimension group selected. I can move the mouse cursor over onto the drawing, just point at this wall, and if I hold down the L key, it'll pick up a polyline around the perimeter of that corridor. So you can see when I move the mouse cursor around, there are some other polylines within the same drawing as well. So to measure the corridor, just simply point at it, hold down the L key and left click once, and it's picked up the area of 23 square meters for that measurement. When I hover the mouse cursor over this measurement, again in that gray hint box, you'll see that it's counted one area. It's given us the length of perimeter around the corridor. I've got a height which I set at 2.7 for my wall height. I've got the area quantity, floor finish and ceiling finish quantity. We've also got a wall area quantity, measured overall of course, and then we've got the volume for the volume of the air in that corridor. So that is a brief overview on area measurement. I'm just going to minimize these dimension group folders. I'm going to move on to some linear measurement. So I'll expand my internal walls dimension group folder and select my timber stud partitions dimension group. Now to save some time, you'll notice that I've already measured all the internal walls for this building. However, it's just a case of simply pointing to a line, left click on the line, and it picks up the length of that wall. You can see when I hover over it, the length of that wall is 3.5 meters. And if I wanted to select another length of another wall, we can just simply click on that. Obviously that is not a wall, so I can just Control Z to undo. Now that I don't have any more walls to measure and I've completed the measurement for the walls, I could actually view my measurement in a 3D type format. To do that, we'll click on the drawings ribbon at the top and then click on the view in 3D. Now, in the display window, we have a 2D drawing in a 3D format. This is not a BIM model. There's no intelligence behind this whatsoever. However, the drawing in the background remains in a 2D format, and because we've added that third dimension of the height of the walls, it actually projects the wall heights out for us to give us a real nice visual perspective of what we've measured on plan. Obviously, this is also measured overall, and you'll also notice that all of these wall heights are at an unrealistic same wall height. So let's go ahead and adjust that. We'll change some wall heights. So I'll close out of the view in 3D. You'll notice this is the dimension group for all of the walls. If I wanted to see the individual lengths for each wall, we can click on the Dimensions tab, and it brings up a list of all the walls that I've measured. So in this case, when I select the wall in the dimensions list on the left hand side, the corresponding wall will highlight blue in the display window on the right hand side. You can see they're currently in this height column. They're all set at 2.7 high. So I'm going to select a range of walls that I've measured just by holding down the shift key. I can right click and then select change height. Let's go ahead and change the height to say 3.5 meters high and then click on OK. When I return back to the Dimension Groups tab, from a linear perspective, you'll notice that nothing's changed. It's still sitting at 113 meters length of wall. However, when I hover the mouse cursor over this dimension group, in that yellow hint box, you'll see that there's a wall area quantity of 318.26 square meters. Now that's obviously increased because of the change in height. We can't view that on a 2D drawing like this, but if I go ahead and click on that View in 3D button, it'll bring up the 3D visual perspective of what we've just changed. So you should be able to notice the change in the wall heights for those walls that I've just changed. I'll just close out of the View in 3D and show you an example on how we could deduct from this measurement if need be. Say for instance we wanted to deduct our door openings as an example. To do that, I can just double click on the timber stud partitions dimension group. I want to change the default height to our door height of 2.1 meters high. Click on update. It's going to bring up a message. Would you like to apply the new height to all the dimensions that use the default height? No, because then that's going to change all my other wall heights. But whatever I measure from now on will be measured at 2.1 meters high. To do the deduction, we need to click on the dimensions ribbon at the top, and you'll see that there's a negative button. So I can do some negative measurements by just selecting the negative button. I'll show you two different methods on how we can deduct for some door openings. One is by just simply clicking on the actual door leaf itself, and you can see there it's deducted a wall area quantity of negative 1.7 square meters. Let's go ahead and click on the other two door leaves over there. That's just simply selecting the line. Another option is we could actually change to point mode. So I was in line mode when I selected the lines over there. I'll click into point mode, and now we could measure the actual opening instead of the door leaf. So I could just simply left click and left click again, which picks up that door opening, another door opening over here, another one over here, and I'll do the two deductions at the bottom of the corridor for these doors as well. So as I'm clicking away and deducting my door openings, you'll see that that quantity has decreased to 107 meters. When I hover the mouse cursor over this dimension group, you'll also notice that the wall area quantity has also decreased. Again, we can't see this on a 2D drawing, so I'm just going to return back to my line mode and show both. So both my positive and my negative measure is showing, and then return back to that View in 3D, which gives us a real nice visual perspective of that deduction for those doors. I'll return back to my 2D drawing, and I'm going to move on to some count measurement. So I'll just minimize that folder and open up my interior doors dimension group folder. You'll notice I haven't yet measured my internal doors, the 720mm doors. So I'll select that dimension group and move the mouse cursor over onto the drawing and just simply zoom into the 720mm doors. Now if it was a normal PDF, we could just simply click on the door leaf and it'll count one door. You'll see there's one door, and move on to the next door. Click on the door leaf and you'll see that it's given us a count of 2 doors. I'm just going to Control Z and undo those two measurements. In this case, with a drawing file type like this one, sometimes the designers include CAD blocks on their drawings. Now we can actually pick up CAD blocks by holding down the Shift key. I'm just pointing at that toilet, which gives us a good illustration of what a CAD block would look like. If I move the mouse cursor over there, that bath was also designed using a CAD block. So in this specific example for our 720mm doors, I'm going to point the mouse cursor to the door and hold down the Shift key, and you'll see it'll pick it up as a CAD block. Furthermore, within CostX, we can hold down the Shift key to pick up the CAD block and hold down the Control key simultaneously, and it'll highlight all the like CAD blocks throughout this entire drawing. So Shift and Control, left click once, and I've measured all 3 of these doors in 1 click. You should actually notice it's picked up 4 doors. So when I zoom out, it's picked up a 4th door at the top of this drawing, and that door actually doesn't even have a dimension attached to it, but it knows that it's the same CAD block as the 3 doors at the bottom over here. We are now going to switch over to the Costing View tab. So when I select the tab, you'll notice that I already have 2 workbooks created. I've got an elemental estimate and a trade estimate. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to continue working in my trade estimate. You can see once I select the workbook title, the actual workbook opens up out to the right hand side. This workbook is actually very similar to an Excel spreadsheet. So if I select a cell, I could start typing into that cell and I could summarize the job however I wanted to. In this example, I've summarized it by trade. A few differences between the CostX workbooks and Excel. The first one is you'll notice columns A through to H, the column headers have already been named. And then out to the right hand side, we have user columns, which we could use for anything that we would like. So for instance, we could apply some formulas in these user columns, and we can extract any data out from the estimate. Another difference between the CostX workbook and Excel is that Excel usually have sheets running alongside each other at the bottom, whereas we don't do that. We actually have levels of cost buildup. So let's choose a trade as an example. Let's work on our plasterboard linings. Out in the F subtotal column, you'll notice that these numbers are in blue. Anything in blue in the CostX workbook means that it has a cost buildup in the level below that. So I can actually double click on this number and it drills down into another cost sheet and down into level 2 of my workbook. In this specific example, I've listed all my plasterboard lining items that make up my plasterboard linings trade. We could actually keep double clicking in the F subtotal column and drill down up to 10 levels of cost buildup if need be. In this case, I've actually just used 2 levels of the workbook, so we can use these arrows out to the left hand side to return back up to a specific level. So if I wanted to return back up to my summary level, I could click on return to level 1 and I'll jump back up to my summary items. I'll just drill back down to level 2 of my plasterboard lining items trade again. And you'll notice that I haven't yet populated my ceilings. I haven't put in any quantities, nor I haven't added any rates into my ceiling lining items. To start off with, I'm going to go ahead and just type in a quantity. So for instance, for my aqualine, I could just type in a quantity of say 29 square meters. You don't necessarily have to always measure anything out to the left hand side. You can just type in a quantity and hit the enter key. And then the same thing goes for the rate. As soon as I type in a rate, I'll just put in a rate of say $50. Once I have a quantity and a rate and hit the enter key, it multiplies out to my H total column. Then my total for this item is added together with all the other items and sent to the level above to make up that 29,000. So when I return back up to my level 1 of the workbook, or my summary level, you'll notice how that total has increased based on the new item that I've just added at level 2 of the workbook. I'm going to go ahead and drill down back to level 2 of my plasterboard linings trade. I'm going to delete this out and show you some alternative methods on how we could populate these trade items. I've just showed you now how we could just type in a quantity. However, there is another method where we can create a live link to our measurements out on the left hand side. Basically, how this would apply is I'm just going to go ahead and expand my dimension group folders. For my aqualine wallboard applying to my ceilings, obviously they are going to appear in the bathroom So I could select the bathroom dimension group by holding down the left mouse button and drag it into the corresponding cell in the workbook. Let go of the left click and you'll see that the Add Quantity window appears, and this is where some major efficiency comes into play. If I click on the down arrow, you'll notice all these secondary quantities that appear. So depending on what I am rating in my workbook, I can apply the corresponding quantity. So I don't know if you remember, when I hovered the mouse cursor over my measurement earlier, we could see all the secondary quantities in the grey hint box, and this is where we could go ahead and choose which quantity type we want to use in the workbook. In this instance, I'm measuring my ceiling, so I can just simply click on area and then click on update. And you'll notice that that quantity is green, which means it has a live link to my measurement out on the left hand side. Let's say, for instance, that quantity was measured, this 29 square meters was measured a month ago, and you have no idea where this quantity is coming from. What we could do is click on the workbooks ribbon and then click on the show source button. What happens is the drawing opens up where that measurement was taken place, and the corresponding dimension group also opens up. So we can always revert back to our measurements. To show you how this live link works, notice the quantity of 29 square meters for my bathroom. If I had to go ahead and delete an area from this measurement, I'll just right click and delete the water closet area, delete dimension. It's gone down to 27 square meters. When I return back to my trade estimate, you'll notice how it's automatically been updated within my workbook. How this works is when I drag and drop the dimension group into the cell, it creates an automatic formula where it says X get area from my dimension group called bathroom. So it's reading that quantity from that dimension group. If I had to return back to the drawing and just wanted to include this area again, I'm just going to use the polyline to measure that area. Left click once. The overall dimension group is now gone back up to 29 square meters. So when I return back to the trade estimate, our quantity has automatically been updated again. And if I had to apply a rate, I'll just type in a rate of $50 and hit the enter key. It multiplies out, and just like before, this is all added up and sent to the level above. Next, for my standard jib ceiling board, I'm going to apply a different method, slightly different. We've already covered the black quantity and the green quantity. You'll notice at the top of here there are a couple of blue quantities in these cells. So let's go ahead and use that method. Remember, anything in blue means that there's a buildup in the level below. So when I double click on a quantity cell, it will drill down into a quantity buildup sheet. And this is where we could apply any quantity calculations. In this specific example, there's going to be standard jib in the bedroom or the bedrooms, the corridor, so I can just hold down the control key and select my corridor dimension group to select multiple dimension groups. Keep holding down control, and there's also going to be some standard jib in the garage and the living. So I've selected all these dimension groups and hold down the left mouse button and drag it into the workbook and drop it down into my D-length column. When I let go of the left mouse button, the add quantity window appears again, and that's where we could choose what quantity type we want to use in my quantity buildup. In this case, I just want to use the area, so I'm happy with the area, and I can click on update. So it's dropped in the quantities for those corresponding dimension groups, and it maintains a live link. You can see that with the green quantities. Out in my H total column, this is all added up and sent to the level above to make up that 254 square meters. So when I return back up, you'll notice that that quantity is in blue. Now I haven't yet got a total for this item, and that's because I haven't put a rate in. Now instead of typing in a rate like we did for the Aqualine wallboard, I want to do a rate buildup for this item. To do that, it's very similar to the quantity column. We could double click on the rate cell, and then we can open up a rate buildup sheet. And if you wanted to, you could go ahead and just simply type in or manually type in a rate buildup to give us a rate. However, within CostX, we have the option of creating a rate library. To do that, to illustrate this topic, I'm going to click on the Rates tab, which will bring up all my different rate libraries. I'll expand one of them and just scroll down. Within this rate library, you can see I have a couple of labor rates, a few material rates, and some plant rates. So to show an example on how I can do a rate buildup for my standard jib to the ceilings, obviously I'm going to need some labor, so I can expand my labor folder. And the first labor rate I'm going to need is my carpenter. So I can left click on my carpenter rate, hold down the left mouse button and drag it into the workbook. Let go of the left mouse button, the add rate window will appear, and I can just click on update and it drops the rate into the rate buildup sheet. Notice how the rate is green, which means that we have a live link to the rate library. So if we had to change the rate within the rate library, it will automatically update in the rate buildup. Obviously, we still need to apply a constant per square meter. So for the carpenter, it's going to take half an hour per square meter. And again, when I have a quantity and a rate and hit the enter key, it multiplies out to my total column. I'm still going to need some more labor, so I can left click on my labor rate, drag it into the workbook, drop that rate into the workbook and click on update. And in this case, obviously, I don't need as much time from the laborer, so I'll just put in a constant of 0.05, hit enter, and it multiplies out. Next, I need some material, so I'll just minimize my labor folder and go to my materials folder with all my interior linings. I'll select my standard jib, 30mm jib, hold down the left mouse button, drag it into the workbook, drop it down and click on update. Obviously this is a rate per 1 square meter, and hit the enter key. And then finally I just need some screws, so I can left click on the screws, drag it into the workbook, click on update, and let's say for instance there's 2 screws per square meter, and hit the enter key and it multiplies out. So this incorporates my rate buildup, and then my total column is added up and sent to the level above to make up my $41 per square meter. When I return back up, notice that it has been populated, and again it's automatically picked up my total because I have a quantity and a rate in that cell. So based on the new item that I've added, this is all added up together and sent to the level above. So when I return back up, we've completed my plasterboard linings trade. So hopefully this makes sense on how the CostX workbooks work in terms of levels of cost buildup within my F subtotal column, and then a level of quantity buildup and a level of rate buildup within the rate column. I'll just return back up to my level 1 of the workbook. Now, let's say, for instance, we've gone ahead and completed this workbook and we would like to print it off to a report. To do that, we can click on the Reports button at the top and select Print Workbook to Report. The Reports window opens up. It displays all the different type of reports that we have. All the reports that you see over here with custom and system in the brackets are shipped with the CostX package when you purchase it. Now within CostX we have 2 different report writers. We have a custom report writer and we have a standard report writer. I'll show you an example of both. I'm first going to go ahead and select my trade detail. You can see this is a standard report and it's reporting from level 1 of my workbook to level 2 of the workbook. Before moving on, I just want to create a copy of this report. I'll leave the name with copy annotated and then click on next. If I scroll down, there's the copy of that workbook. The reason why I've done that is with the system reports you won't be able to edit them because they shipped with the software. However, you could use them as a template and create your own report. If I had to click on the edit button now, you'll see it brings up the report property. And this is where we could choose what data we want to use or report on, so which columns we want to include, and so on. We have other different settings, so grouping settings, page layout settings, where you can set the margins. You can play around with the headers and put in any logos if you wanted to. And then we have column specific settings and some footer settings. If I click on the preview button, it'll give us a preview of this report. So there's my trade detail report. If I scroll down, this is basically all the content within my level 2 of the workbook. In this example, you'll notice that I'm currently displaying my factor column. However, there's no content within that factor column. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to delete the subtotal and the factor column so that just my total column appears. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll just click on the close button and return back to the data tab. I've currently got all of these columns selected. So if I wanted to remove the subtotal, I could just select it and then click on the arrow to send it out to the left hand side. Same with the factor, click on the arrow. Now let's click on preview and review the adjustments. So you can see now how those two columns have been removed from this report. This is just a basic example of a standard report. I'm going to return back to my report suite and show you an example on a custom report that we have built. If I select this report and click on generate, and let's click on preview. This is a custom report reporting on level 1 to level 2 of the workbook. I'm just going to go ahead and select view the whole page. Basically, in this report, when we set it up to include a cover sheet. You could go ahead and do the same thing. This is all data that's linking to the workbook name and some of the information behind that workbook. Out to the right hand side, we have basically a copy of level 1 of the workbook, and we've also applied a logo. You could again replace this logo with your own, and at the top of the head over here we have data linking to the workbook again. When I scroll down, you'll notice that all my level 2 detail will also be printed as part of this report. That's just an example of a custom report that you could build if you wanted to. I'll click on close and close back out of my report suite. A further functionality that we have available within CostX is auto revisioning. To illustrate how auto revisioning works, I'm going to go ahead and open up a different example. In this example, I have 2 workbooks already uploaded, and when I switch over to the dimension view, I've also got 2 drawings already included in this building. When I expand the dimension groups, I've already measured all my dimension groups from these corresponding drawings. Let's return back to the costing view, and I'm just going to work on the one estimate for now. When I select it, you'll also notice the total. Basically, the workbook is complete and my estimate's complete based on my initial revision. Let's say, for instance, now we want to add in a new revision as a new drawing was sent through. What we can do is click on the revisions ribbon at the top and then click on add. I'm just going to give this name of revision number 2 and then click on insert. Immediately you'll notice that the workbooks are locked off, so I can't change anything at this point in time. And when I switch over to the dimension view, both the drawings are also locked off. Let's run with a hypothetical example. Let's say, for instance, this site plan, there was a new issue on this drawing, something's changed. However, the floor plan, this drawing has not changed at all. The first thing that we would need to do is select the drawing and then click on Promote Drawing to unlock it. When the Promote Drawing window opens up, it gives us 2 different options. It gives us an option to either choose a new drawing file if there was a new revision, or we've got the option to keep the same drawing file. In this case, nothing's changed on this drawing, so I can select the Keep the Same Drawing File radio button and then click on OK. And you'll see that the lock has now been removed from that drawing title. However, with a site plan, I'll select the site plan and click on Promote Drawing. This time, we want to choose a new drawing file. Obviously, because there's a new drawing that's been issued. Click on OK. I could go ahead and look for my new revised drawing, in this case site plan number 2, and then click on open. The drawing properties window will open up again, where it gives you the opportunity to either rename the drawing and put into a new folder if we want to, and apply any scales if needed. In this case it's a DWG drawing, so I don't need to apply any scales. So I'll click on update, and the first thing you'll notice, if you haven't already noticed anything different on the actual drawing, we should be able to notice that there's an exclamation mark against that drawing title on the left hand side. Basically what that exclamation mark is telling us is that we had done some measurements on the previous drawing. However, those measurements are now not matching up to the new lines on the new drawing. Well, where exactly? The first thing I'll probably do is compare the drawings. So I'll click on the compare drawings button, and we have different options. Which revision do you want to compare with? In this case, I want to compare it with revision number 1. And we have different comparison methods. Obviously we're not dealing with BIM, so that would be the match objects option. I'd rather overlay these two different drawings. Click on OK. And then we have two different drawings. So if I just left click and drag this drawing out, the green one is the new drawing and the red one is the old drawing. Now this is just one option of the comparison. You can also use the match line objects. In this case I just wanted to show you the two different drawings that we can overlay, one on top of the other. I'll just zoom in a little bit, gets a little bit more accurate, and there we go. So basically using this view you would go ahead and try and look for the clear red lines. Obviously that's where the major differences would be, and you can see when I zoom in there's a solid red line, so something's obviously changed over there. I can close out of this view, just click on close and return back to the drawings. Not only do we have an exclamation mark against that drawing title, we've also got exclamation mark against some of the dimension groups out to the bottom left hand side over here. All we need to do is work through each of these dimension groups with the exclamation mark. So the first of all, the brick piers, I can select that. That means something's different with that, or something might have moved slightly on the drawing with that dimension group selected. When I select it, this window opens up where it says, do you want to load the data from the previous revision now? Yes, I do. I'll click on yes, and you'll see that there are the measurements that appear on the new drawing. So I don't have to remeasure everything, I just need to double check if that measurement's correct. In this case I'm actually happy with those measurements, so I can return back to the revisions tab and click on the accept button. It locks the measurements back down, and you'll see the quantity has been locked down to 12 again, 12 number, and the exclamation mark is removed from that drawing title. The next dimension group, driveway, you'll immediately see a difference over there. Also to note, the differences are highlighted in yellow. So when I zoom in, you can see there's a yellow line over there, which means there is no longer a line over there. However, on the previous drawing, there was a line. I can hover over this yellow line now, right click and select incomplete area. So instead of deleting my measurement and remeasuring it all again, I can just uncomplete the area and update it according to the new drawing. Hit enter, I'm happy with that measurement, and then click on accept. The next dimension group, the fencing, again just look for the yellow lines. In this example there's a yellow line over there, however I want to measure a fence over there. This line may have moved slightly from one drawing to another. I can just right click on that yellow line and say best match dimension. It'll turn green and snap itself to the nearest line on the drawing. If I look at this yellow line over here, obviously I would like to delete that fence. I can simply right click on it and select delete dimension. I've completed the fence measure and I'm happy with it, so I can click on accept. The next one, the footpath crossing. I've already counted one footpath crossing. I'm just going to change my measurement mode to point and make sure I turn my snap off so I can freehand measure and drop a point on that footpath crossing. So now I would have measured 2, return back to my revisions tab and then click on accept. And it locks it down and removes that exclamation mark. The site area is the final dimension group. Again, look for the yellow lines. In this case, there's a big yellow line across the left-hand side of the drawing. Maybe that line has also just moved slightly from one revision to another. However, I'm happy with that measurement. When you want to best match all the dimensions on the drawing, we can just click on Best Match All, and it attaches itself to the nearest line and closes it off. And then click on Accept, and it locks that quantity back down. So once you've worked through all your dimension groups that have exclamation marks against them and accepted those changes, the exclamation mark would have also been removed from that drawing title. So now we know that we've updated all the dimensions, and if there was anything new on the drawing, you would have added a new dimension group in and completed the corresponding measure. If we switch over to the estimate now, let's click on the Elemental Units tab at the top over there. You'll notice the total of 770,000 or just over. Because we have these dimension groups automatically feeding or linking into the workbook, these updated quantities would have also applied to the new workbook. However, it's still locked off at the old revision, so I need to have this workbook selected and click on Promote Workbook. Notice the total. It's gone up to 781,000 based on the updated measures that I've applied. Now, if we wanted to see a difference between the one revision to another, we could actually print off a report with the Workbooks ribbon tab at the top. Click on the Reports button and then select Print Workbook to Report. You can set up a report very similar to this, where I have a detailed comparison with variance report. It's a standard report reporting on level 1 to 2 of the workbook. I click on Generate and then click on Preview. You'll notice there's a detailed comparison with variance report. In this report, I've asked it to print off my previous quantity versus my actual quantity based on the latest revision and show the variance in that quantity. I've also set it up to include the previous total dollar value, the total value at this stage, and then the total variance in that cost. So for instance, we changed a few measurements in my external works. I'll click on my external works and scroll down. So there's the concrete to paving. It was 74 square meters. It's now 115, therefore a variance of 41 square meters. It was a total dollar value of $7,000. It's gone up to $10,925, and therefore a variance in cost of $3,895. Because we laid down that extra paving, we saved on the grassing area. So you can see how there's less grass now, 40 square meters less, and therefore cost saving. If I keep scrolling down, the brick piers didn't change. The fencing, however, we had to delete the one fence or 2 meters of the fence, and therefore cost saving of $184. The footpath crossing, there was an extra one, and therefore an extra cost of $5,000 for that footpath crossing. So this is just a basic example on how we can work through the revisions process and apply some auto revisioning. The next example that I'd like to show you in this demonstration is an example on the topic of BIM, Building Information Modeling. Just open up this building. I'm going to go ahead and select the BIM model. Over there you can see it called Eco Homes. The model will open up in the display window where we could zoom in and zoom out of this model. We could also rotate the model to give us a real nice visual perspective all around if you wanted to. You could also use the cube to get a back view of the house, corner view, right hand side of the house, and so on. If we wanted an oblique view, we could also do that. Just click on the corner of the cube and it'll give us an oblique view of this BIM model. With regards to this BIM model, obviously a BIM model is made up of objects, and each object have properties attached to them. So for instance, if I had to point my mouse cursor at this garage door, that would be the object within the model. If I can right click on the object and select Object Properties, it'll bring up all the properties that have been included from the design software. So in this case we have the naming conventions, we have some dimensions, which obviously is the most important part that we're looking for. This is probably one of the first steps that we would recommend doing when importing a BIM model, is to view the properties for the objects. If there's no information, you would need to collaborate back with the architect and ask them to include some of these properties within their models. We do also have a drawing file optimization document that you could send off to the architect or the designer, refer them to the specific export options. I'll click on close, and just like on the 2D drawings when we selected the layers tab, we could filter between different layers. When we import a BIM model, we can click on the model tab, which will bring up a model tree structure out on the left hand side. So basically I'm just going to switch to that oblique view again and zoom out a bit. We can now filter through this model by using the model tree out on the left hand side. So if I select my doors, all my doors would be displayed. If I had to select the entourage, there's the two cars. If I was to select the fascias, all my fascias would be displayed, and floors, and so on and so forth. You can just select the drawing node at the top, which will display everything. When I return back to the drawings tab, we can also change this up from include a wireframe view or switch off the wireframe. We can switch off the shaded so that we just have the wireframe of the model view. We can also switch on the transparency so that we can have a full view of the internal side of the building. Another option is, if we want to, we could hold down the E key, so switch to the front view, hold down the E key on the keyboard, move the mouse forward, just slide the mouse along your desk, and it gives us a cross-sectional view of the model. I'll just zoom back out, switch over to the top view, hold down the E key, just work through this model, which will cut off the roof. Once you've got a cross-section through that model, you can zoom back out and view it if you wanted to. Right, so that's just some navigation around the model and turning some of the model nodes on and off. Improve your viewing of the model. Next, you'll see at the bottom left-hand side over here, I haven't yet created any dimension groups for this model. We could, if we wanted to, hover the mouse cursor over an object, right-click on the object, and select Create Dimension Group. The Dimension Group properties will open up. This is where we can add a description for the dimension group. So I'll just say sheet metal roof, and I'll put into a folder called roofing. I'll leave the measurement type to set to area. I'll then jump across to the BIM dimensions, and in the area field we would like to make sure that when we measure the roof it picks up the area. So to do that, I'll click on this ellipsis button, go to the properties, which will bring up the properties for this object. I can scroll down and I just need to double click on the area. You can see there's a quantity of 52. Double click on that. The area within the square brackets will appear in my dimension expression editor field at the top, and then I can click on close, and the area will be carried through to my BIM dimensions. Click on insert and you'll notice the new dimension group appear on the left hand side. So I can select the dimension group, point the mouse cursor at the object, and just simply left click on it once, and you can see it's measured 52 square meters. I can just click on the remaining roof area, and it's gone ahead and measured a total of 253 square meters. So that's one option of measuring from a BIM model. I'm going to go ahead and delete this dimension group out. Another option is we could actually import dimensions, so using a BIM template. To do that, we need to click on the dimensions ribbon at the top, click on the import button. Got two different import options: import using a BIM template, which are templates that CostX or Exactl have written and send with the software package, or we can import dimensions using a model map. I'll show you an example on both, but first of all, to import dimensions using a BIM template, select that. We have different templates that we send with the software depending on the source software. This model in the background was actually designed in Revit, so we can select the Revit General, click on Open, and it works through the model and measures everything that's there. The warning window appears, just telling me that I've measured in millimeters. Yes, I'm happy with that, and click on OK. So there it is. It's measured everything that's in there, and you'll see the structure of my dimension groups is exactly the same structure coming from my model tree within the model tab over there. I'll return back to the drawings tab, and you can see how it's measured everything in the model. Another option is we could actually create a model map. So I'll select all of this and just delete it. Right click and delete. And we could create a new model map. So click on model maps, and I'm going to go ahead and click on insert. I'm just going to call this model map a web demo, and then select OK. Basically, CostX goes into model mapping mode. You'll notice at the top, all the other ribbons are no longer there. We simply just have the one model map tab. Within this model map window, we have 4 different sections. Top left hand side, we have the model tree structure out on the left hand side. Then we have the display window. And at the bottom, we have a schedule displaying all the properties that are currently displayed in the display window. Towards the bottom left hand side, we have our mapping definition window. This is where you as the estimator or the QS could actually control what information you would like to use in your measurements from the model. As an example, let's go ahead and measure the doors. So I'll select my doors node. You'll see that the model actually filters to only display the doors. The schedule at the bottom only displays the properties that are currently displayed in the window. Within the schedule, you'll see there's a lot of information. There's some naming convention over there. There's our head height, based on which level these doors are sitting on. We've got a door's name, and we have different sizes, different types, and so on. So now we can move to our mapping definition. I would like to create a folder, a dimension group folder. To do that, what we could do is look into the schedule and look for a good folder name. We could possibly use the doors, so we could select the level 1, drag the level 1 field into the folder field, and now it'll create a folder called doors. Next, the dimension group. What do I want to separate these doors by? Or maybe I would like to separate the doors according to whether they are single flush overhead door or sliding or whatever the case is. So now I can select this property, drag it into the dimension group field, and it will measure the doors and separate them according to these descriptions. When I click on preview, let's preview what I've measured so far. Here we go. It's created a folder called doors, and if I expand the doors folder, you'll see it's measured all the doors according to the property that I chose it to measure against. So you have full control over what information you'd like to use. I'll return back to my mapping definition. Another example is, let's move on to the fascias, for example. A folder name, I'd look into the schedule. The fascia, or maybe even fascias, would be a good folder name. So I'd select the fascias, drag it into the folder field, and drop it down. How do I want to separate all these fascias? Or maybe I'll use the profile. So I can select the profile name, which is the property of 19 by 153. I can select that and drag it into the dimension group field. If I scroll down in this mapping definition, you'll see there are some other fields. First of all, I want to change the measurement type to length, as well as the display to length for these fascias. And then in the length field, we can actually drag and drop the length property into the length field. That's it. So now let's click on preview. It's created a folder called fascias, and if I expand that, it's measured the total length of all my fascias. So once you've created a model map against a node, you'll see that the node becomes bold, which means you've created a mapping definition for that node. Once you've worked through your entire model tree out on the left hand side, you can then click on the close button. I'm just going to display all my objects, or show all objects. Turn the schedule off. The other option when we imported the dimensions, or when we click on the import button, is to import dimensions using a model map. So I'll select that option this time, and I'm going to go to my web demo model map and click on select. It works through the model and it measures it according to how you've asked it to measure. So in that case, I've asked it to create a folder called doors and fascias, and if I expand each of these folders, it's measured according to the properties that I've asked it to measure it against. So those are the 3 different options on how to measure from a BIM model. And that concludes the web demonstration. Thank you all very much for watching, and hopefully it has been helpful. Cheerio.